Hi everyone, welcome to the very last episode in this winter series, and we're delighted tonight to have Kath with us, and she's going to be talking about one of my very favourite topics, which is Scottish winter. So we'll come on to that in a minute, but before I kind of go through the usual and introduce the club, I just wanted to say a massive thank you to all of our speakers that joined us this year. It's been an incredible season of inspirational talks. So if you haven't seen them, then do check out our website. We've got loads of great content, so feel free to watch it at your leisure. Some of the best kind of armchair viewing you will see. And also to say a massive thank you to Lizzie and Jenny, who without them there would be no WAAC winter series. So Lizzie works super hard making sure all the speakers are comfortable with their presentations. She does a fabulous job on the night of being behind the scenes and being technical support and making sure everything runs really smoothly. And Jenny equally does a fantastic job preparing for these sessions and guaranteeing all our speakers. So I just want to say a massive thank you to those guys. Really appreciate it. And also say thank you to the women that make up our community. We usually, WAAC usually gets together in person, and we have winter events and summer events where we have skills workshops, but also we meet new adventure buddies and get together and play in the mountains. Unfortunately, we've been a bit restricted, over the last year or so. So this is why we've been bringing you some armchair adventures, so that we can still keep that spirit alive and people can plan and start dreaming up what's going to happen post-lockdown. So thank you very much to everybody who's part of the community. Carry on following us and watch this space. We will be back with more content and, most importantly, get-togethers as soon as we can. So just a little bit about how tonight's going to work. We are, as you all can see, we've muted your mics and turned off your videos, and that's just so that we don't distract the presenters with any background noises. We're keeping ours on just so that the speakers don't feel like they're talking to a black hole. But don't worry, you will get the opportunity to speak in person, and you can turn your video on and turn your audio on and ask a question at the end in our Q&A. Alternatively, if you're not comfortable doing that, then you can always raise your hand digitally, and Jenny will tell you about how to do that, and then we can come to you and you can post your question in the chat and we'll answer it. So there's a number of ways in which you can participate, but for now we ask that you remain quiet and listen to the talk, and we will leave plenty of time for Q&A at the end. And one final note, we are live on Facebook in our private group, just so that you're all aware of that. Thank you. And I'm going to hand over to Jenny, who's going to introduce Kath.
Brilliant, thanks Louise. Yeah, thanks so much for joining us for our final winter talk as we hopefully head into spring. So we're thrilled to welcome back Kath James. Kath did a talk for us in our summer series about developing your alpine career, and she's very kindly volunteered herself this time to come back and talk about Scottish winter climbing, something that I think a lot of our members would have been doing around now if we'd been allowed up to Scotland, and it's like there's fantastic conditions up there at the moment. So if you are in Scotland and able to travel and enjoy the Scottish winter, do it for all of us as well. So Kath is a winter mountaineering and climbing instructor, and she's a senior instructor at Plas Brenin here in North Wales, and she's done some amazing alpine climbs and also climbed over in Yosemite, and if you want to read more about that, you can head to our website and there's a profile page on Kath James herself. So we'll hand over to Kath now and learn more about Scottish winter climbing. Thanks, Kath. Do you want to unmute yourself? Fab.
Yep, I'm here. Hi everyone, thanks for coming along. I'm going to talk about the Scottish winter, and this is something that I look forward to every season. So this year it's been a bit disappointing to be in North Wales and not up there enjoying what looked to be pretty special conditions this winter. But and that's kind of why I volunteered to do another one, because Scotland's a really sort of special place close to my heart, and it's a part of the winter I really enjoy, and I just wanted to use this as an opportunity to perhaps introduce some other women to get out there and get involved in the Scottish winter and see some pictures of some blue sky and beautiful days. But it comes with a bit of a warning that for your many days of grey, windy, cold, you get the odd blue sky day. So these photos are probably the last 15, the best of the last 15 years, really. So I'm going to talk predominantly about the northwest of Scotland because it's a lesser known area, but it's really special part of Scotland. Can I move the slide on? Cool, there we go. So by the northwest, I'm talking about the area in the red square. So it's kind of almost directly north of Ben Nevis and over to the west of the Cairngorms. It's areas like Torridon and Loch Carron. The main sort of settlements, I suppose, are Ullapool and Loch Carron. They're the sort of bigger places that you might base yourself, or perhaps in Gairloch. So the mountains up there are really spectacular. They're really old and they've got impressive rock types. There's often layers of sandstone and layers of quartzite. And quartzite's particularly nice rock to climb on for mixed climbing. It gives good hooks and solid protection. Whereas sandstone can feel a little bit more sketchy until you get used to it, a bit like getting slopey, so it's more like a gritstone, but obviously you're climbing on it with your crampons and axes. So really spectacular, massive glens with dinosaur-like mountains poking out of them. And what I'm going to do is run through kind of grade 1 to grade 5, some of my favourite routes that have mostly been on good weather days. So they're the ones when I've managed to get better photos, or friends have managed to get better photos. But starting with this picture of a snowplow, and I guess that's just a reminder really to plan your days carefully, because you're much more remote up there, you're away from the bigger roads, and if there's a lot of snow, you can end up getting stranded. So just a reminder to plan things out, and we'll talk about that a bit more as I go through. So I'm going to start grade 1, and this is a really interesting gully on Brenin in Torridon. It's called Fuselage Gully, and there was a Lancaster bomber flying in the 50s. I can't remember exactly which year, but they're out on some sort of training mission, and they hit the triple buttress of Brenin, and the debris got spread everywhere. And this grade 1 gully is a really cool journey where you go up through some of this wreckage. So you're sort of pulling on the wheel and bits of the fuselage to progress and make your way up the gully. So the gully actually goes up the right hand side here. I'm just going to, so you go up here and then back in behind West Buttress. So we've got East Buttress, Central Buttress and West Buttress, and I'm going to talk about East Buttress and West Buttress later. Central Buttress is still on my tick list. That's one that I'm waiting to do still. But fuselage comes up here, and there's, on a lean winter's day like this day here, you'll pick up different bits of engine and stuff as you work your way up the slope, and then it's a nice steady grade 1 slope, and then into this really atmospheric gully to get up onto the summit plateau. There's a bit of a delay, I think, on switching slides. There we go. So this is looking down the first part of the gully. So you can see it's a classic sort of one-axe journey. You can see the lake down below. And then this is on that day when we topped out. So the mountains, compared to somewhere like the Alps, they look quite lean, but actually there's good climbing conditions in the gullies and so on when the conditions are like this. And the descent off is down a steep sort of scree and heather slope back down to the road. So it's quite a nice journey. It's probably 3 hours walk around to Triple Buttress, bit of time to get up the gully, and then about an hour and a half to get back down to the road. So it's quite a big day, but a spectacular day with fairly simple navigation at the end of the day. Next one I'm going to talk about is Hayfork Gully on Anshellac. And in the Scottish Winter Climbs book by Andy Nesbitt, which sort of shows you all the best climbs in Scotland, really, this is one of 2 grade 1 gullies that get 4 stars, and the view from the top is just phenomenal. It's gobsmacking, really. You top out and you look into the next corrie. It's totally beautiful. The other gully that gets 4 stars is Deep South Gully on Ben Alligan, so that's another one on my tick list. Yet to do, but I imagine it'll be equally atmospheric and impressive. So this is the view in. And again, this was a relatively lean winter. I think it was 2017 when I did this. So not super conditions, but there were enough conditions to climb things. So this is the corrie you come into, and the gully goes up in the back of the corrie there. It's a bit hidden in this picture. And then this is me making my way up. So it's another deep slot between rock buttresses. And I did this gully with Gary Smith. So I've credited the photo there, but the reason for that is he's written a beautiful book about WAAC journeys in Scotland. And that's definitely one, if you aspire to go and do that sort of thing in Scotland, that's a really good book to get. It's got really good, amazing, awe-inspiring photos and good details of the routes. So this was a great day out of Gary, going up and down until he got the perfect shot. This is the crux, I would say, and in some conditions it could be a bit trickier than grade 1. So you just want to make sure there's good snow cover for it to be consistent at the grade. And then we were pretty lucky that day. The weather was beautiful, it was calm. It was I had 2 days out in Scotland that winter. I just had my first son. So there was this day with Gary and another day with Gary on Fearcall Ridge to get photos for his book. And we had best weather, we saw an eagle, and good conditions. So it was like perfect day out, really. And this is the view from the top. So you just get an amazing view into the next corrie over and of the pinnacles of Anchelac. And that in its own right is a really cool grade 2 winter journey, like a really good ridge traverse that is just inspirational and super atmospheric. I haven't got any photos of that, and I've not put it in this presentation because when I've done it, the weather's been really horrible. So I didn't think you'd appreciate grey photos of a windy day looking miserable. But hopefully just mentioning it will put it on your list. So another super cool route is the Keogh Nose on Ben Van, and this is another sort of ridge thing. And the way that I did this was to do this north gully onto it. Now you don't need to do the north gully, you can get onto it from the other side without going up this grade 2 gully. And I'd say on this particular day it was more like grade 3. There were a couple of much steeper icy pulls than you'd expect on a grade 2, so it's very conditions dependent. And that is one issue with the Northwest, is that some things are very conditions dependent. Once you're getting onto the buttresses or some of the steep gullies that have got steeper steps in, they need to be banked out to be a reasonable grade. So it's worth trying to gather a little bit of information about the more esoteric things, the things that haven't got stars or much of a write-up in the guidebook. But this was a really cool little journey up this gully. And when you top out on the gully, you get onto the Keogh Ridge and then you traverse that along. So this is the front cover of Martin Moran, a guide who sadly got killed in the Himalayas a while ago. He had a guiding company up there, and this was the front cover of his book, Scotland's Winter Mountains, which is a really, really cool book about Scotland's winter mountains. And this was his local sort of stomping ground. So really impressive bit of terrain. Looks harder than grade 2, but actually when things are front on, they always look steeper than they are when you get onto them. So you continue along the ridge and then up the buttress at the end, and just in here somewhere there's a little abseil to do. I think it's like 5 meters or something, just abseil down some steeper ground and then you're back into climbing up. So it's a good all-round mountaineering adventure, really. Next, grade 2 then, it's another traversey type of thing, the Traverse of Liac, pretty famous traverse. A lot of walking with some trickier bits in the middle over the pinnacles. And I think this picture here really highlights that sort of dinosaurs coming out of the glen atmosphere of a lot of the peaks of the northwest. So this is on sort of more mellow part of the ridge. The rope can go away, you can wander along, enjoy the scenery. And the same here. So you get a couple of Munros on this ridge traverse. And this is sort of nice sort of atmospheric sun shot. And then I haven't got any shots of the pinnacles, unfortunately, but there's a bit of trickier climbing where you might decide you're going to get the rope out and protect yourself for a few pitches traversing around the pinnacles, and then you're back to much easier terrain. Once you get to the end, so you normally do it east to west, and once you get to the end, the final Munro, Mullock and Corrian, you can either descend down a rocky shoulder that's kind of continuous little steps, requires quite a lot of concentration, but it's easy. Or if you're lucky, there's a really good gully you can go down, and you can check that out from the road just above Torridon. If you look up from there, if the gully's full of snow and avalanche conditions are appropriate, you get one of the longest bum slides off a Munro in Scotland, I think, which is pretty cool because it saves the knees. So this, I've done this a few times, but on this day when this beautiful picture was taken, I was with Gary and another friend, Steve, to get photos for his book, and we just got the best bum slide ever, and then just walked across dry heather moorland at the bottom back to the car with big smiles on our faces. So that's a pretty cool option. Another little adventure on WAAC is the Northern Pinnacles. So you go around the back of the mountain from the Torridon end, so from the west end, and you get into a corrie, up a little gully and onto these pinnacles. So this is definitely harder than the normal traverse of WAAC. I'd say it's a sort of grade 2 plus a couple of tricky little steps. Definitely feels more exposed than the pinnacles on the standard ridge. So this is a view of the back of WAAC, and you come into this corrie around the back, and then this line here is that ridge line of the Northern Pinnacles. So that's another view of it. And then looking back along it again. And we were lucky again. I've had quite a few days on WAAC, and I've had quite a few days in the northwest, I think, really, where it ended up with spectacular sunsets and like cool reflections on lakes and great oranges and sort of nice alpenglow and just absolutely stunning scenery, and the sort of shape of the mountains and the locks really emphasizing all of that. So that's probably why it's one of my favorite places to go, really. So this, leaping up into grade 3 at Scoil Fanach, another Munro, and the Resurrection. It's like a alpine north face. It's like a mini north face. It feels really committing. It's a really long trudging, 3 or 4 hours of mindless bog trotting, but don't let that put you off, because once you're there, you forget about the endless walking. So this is us walking in. Started in the dark. There's some river crossings, so you need to make sure that your boots are fully waterproof, because the last thing you want is wet feet to then be trudging up big snow slopes and having a long walk back out. So making sure you've got walking poles is a good idea for balance, and then making sure your boots are fully waterproof is sensible too. And this is us working our way up onto the face. The route comes up these ice falls, and it's really foreshortened when you're underneath. You kind of come up and then work your way back. It's hard to see the middle snow slopes in this picture. So this is, the route's then going to go off up here. And it feels like a serious route. It's got lots of easy angled snow with some icy pitches and some turfy pitches, but there's not a lot of gear between the belays, and it's definitely a route where you want to have a load of turf protection with you to protect things. So there was rock belays, there was ice screw belays, but we also needed to use warthogs and bulldogs. So this was the last pitch. I think this belay was a rock belay, but pegs rather than wires. So we had some knife blade pegs, hammered them in. So quite a lot of different techniques needed to get up this face. And for those of you that aren't familiar, I'll just run through this kit because it's a bit funky really. So on the left, we've got a bulldog, and a bulldog, you basically hammer in on the back here into turf, or you could hammer it into an icy crack that's just about the width of the pick. So it works like an ice pick going in, but you then hammer it in, and it obviously is going to be taking a pull in that direction. So that's one piece of kit. To get it out, you sort of hammer on that side, and quite often you end up sticking your axe pick through there and sort of levering it out. And then the red and silver things down here, they're warthogs, and you literally just hammer them in like you'd hammer a nail, but to get them back out, you unscrew them. And sometimes it can be tricky to get started. So again, you're using that axe pick to get a bit of leverage to pull them back out. And then at the top, we've got pegs. And pegs, for a lot of Scottish winter climbs these days, you can protect them with nuts and cams and ice screws. So if you're in the Northern Corries, often really now these days, there's either pegs in situ or you can protect with other kit. But if you're going somewhere a little bit different, or somewhere where the rock's a bit softer, so where you've got schist or something like that, sometimes in sandstone as well, pegs can be useful to have, and you hammer them in and then you knock them in the opposite direction to get them back out. But so they're kind of quite an old school bit of kit, but still really useful in the winter, and particularly useful when the cracks are all iced up and your nuts or rocks on wire don't really stick that well in the crack. So they're bits of kit you need to be au fait with to get on something like the Resurrection, really. So a bit of ice climbing now. Penguin Gully on Benjerrig, so yet another Munro. I'm sounding like a secret Munro bagger now, aren't I? Or maybe not so secret. Another Munro, and a brilliant long grade 3-4 ice route that's often in condition. So it's probably the first route to come into condition, and on Benjerrig, and it's just a really long, nice adventure. And this is the view from the top. So as you're walking off Benjerrig, you can look across at Anchelac. So that's the pinnacles of Anchelac that you could see from the top of Hayfort Gully, and Hayfort Gully is in this corrie here. But you also get a really cool view north to the summits of Sutherland. So all the smaller hills that are north of Ullapool. Benjerrig's just on the road just before you get into Ullapool. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of these peaks later on. And as you can see, they're not so big, so they don't hold as much snow with being slightly lower altitude, and they also a bit closer to the sea. So it takes a bit more sort of coldness to get them into condition. So the next area I'm going to talk about is Milgorm, and this is Scotland's shortest walk-in, probably. So you can park at the Bilac na Bar Col and just walk in, and it's maybe 20 minutes max to get to the bottom of some of these routes. Just a word of caution, having done that once and then it snowed really heavily for the whole route, and then had a total epic driving out with loads of snow on the road, and yeah, it just being more of an adventure than we ever intended it to. Just check the forecast before you go so that you know that you're going to be able to drive back down the road at the end of the day. There's loads of space to park at the bottom before you get onto a steep bit of road, and it's only 40 minutes walk from there, so it's worth weighing that up so you don't have an epic with a vehicle at the end of the day. So Cobalt Buttress is the climb on this crag I'm going to talk about. It's a mixed route, grade 4, and it's sandstone. It takes a little bit to get used to sandstone, I think, because it can be quite rounded in places. So you're trying to like stand on slightly more rounded edges. Equally, you can get really positive edges too. What was nice about this route was that there were quite positive hooks and good gear as well. So lots of cams, lots of nuts, and a good amount of turf to swing your axes into as well. So this is a bit higher up. And then this was our view at the end of that day, pretty spectacular. From the Col, you could see over to Skye, and it was looking absolutely stunning that day. But yeah, we sort of wandered back off and back down to the vehicle, and then realised that it snowed a lot more than we thought. So we're back to Benvan. This is literally just down the road from Milgorm. And there's two really spectacular sort of straight line ice gullies on Benvan, March Hare's Gully and Mad Hatter's Gully. Mad Hatter's has got a real steepening in the middle at grade 5. I've yet to do that. I'm waiting for that for the next opportunity to get there to do that. But I have done this March Hare's, and this was sort of aesthetically pleasing line, I think, with it just being straight from the bottom to the top, and then you're out onto the big plateau at the top. And it was just continuously nice grade 4 ice climbing, getting screws in, the odd bit of rock gear in the side walls, but mostly just ice screws all the way. So another mixed route, we're going back to Brenin, and we're on East Buttress, so the left-hand one. And Brenin is really interesting, I think, because this triple buttress has got 2 tiers. The bottom tier here is sandstone, and the top tier is quartzite, so it's quite different styles of climbing. And the central buttress goes up through both, but the west buttress and the east buttress sneak in around the side into the quartz band. So this east buttress, you sneak in along this terrace and then go up the crest of the buttress. And the climbing's just amazing. Like you get really good gear and really positive hooks. So this is on the walk-in, and this is the climbing. So positive hooks, good gear. It all feels really safe. It's quite steep. I think that's often the nature of quartzite, but because you can get your axes in and get really good hooks, it feels really positive. And then this is the west buttress. So Fuselage Gully went up here, and the west buttress comes up here a little bit and then comes onto this terrace and then works its way up. And west buttress, whereas east buttress is a lot of sort of face climbing, west buttress sneaks its way up lots of chimneys and corners. So we worked our way up some chimneys and corners, and then we traversed along another terrace to work our way up here. And then we continued on up another chimney. And then the route carries on up through the line of weakness, on up to the top. So this was really, I think, one of the first routes this particular season. So by the time we'd walked in, probably weren't particularly fast because we hadn't been out much that season, but ended up getting a nice sort of alpenglow on the rock at the end of the day. And then fortunately the descent off Brenin is fairly straightforward, so even topping out relatively late, it didn't matter too much. So this is just a nice view looking north from the summit of the route, summit of the west buttress of triple buttresses. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about those peaks in the far northwest. So the peaks of Sutherland. I've not done huge amounts of climbing up there. I've walked up various core bits up there, and they're all pretty exciting and different, and it feels really wild and out there and very rare to meet anyone else when you're up there. But this bucket buttress on Quinag, this is another little gem in terms of a short walk in. You can park at a col, walk for an hour maybe onto the summit, and then you just drop down the side of the crag and you get 2 pitches of amazing quartzite climbing. So again, it's that same sort of deep hooks, good gear, positive, steep, fun, no one's around, crag to yourselves. And if you were super keen, you could probably get a couple of routes in there in a day, sort of do 2 pitches, walk back around and do another pitches. If you think on the Ben, you might do 6, 7, 8 pitches in a day, and you spent a couple of hours walking in and it's a couple of hours to walk off. Here you've got 50 minutes to an hour and 10 of walking in, do 2 pitches. It's only going to take you half an hour or so to get back to the bottom, get another couple of pitches in, and make the most of what's quite a little crag really for Scotland, but a fun day out in a really cool place. You can just see the sea in behind there. Very spectacular place to hang out, and fun climbing as well. And that's the view looking back south to Sullivan, I think. So that kind of wraps up. They're my best photos of climbing in the Northwest. That kind of wraps that up. But I expect some people will be asking about the book I've mentioned. So I'll give Gary a plug. He spent 3 or 4 winters trying to get the best photos he could. And he's done a really good job, in my opinion. And I think in lots of other people's opinion as well. He's picked out some really cool routes all across Scotland that are great things to go out and try. And they're really good as a sort of introductory way of getting into stepping up from winter walking into a bit of winter mountaineering, perhaps as a pathway onto doing some winter climbing. And he gives a bit of info on different areas and a little bit of info on the sort of things you might want to take, and some pointers and so on as well. So you can probably get it off Amazon, but it would be nice if you got it direct from Gary at Northern Edge Books, and then he's not having anything taken from Amazon for them selling it. And he'd really appreciate that. So yeah, check it out if you're interested. Put it on the Christmas list or the birthday list, because it's a good one to have on your bookshelf. And then 2 other books that are worth having: The Scottish Winter Climbs, covers the whole of Scotland, but it's got the best of Scottish winter climbing. So I have lots of stuff in the Northwest, Cairngorms, Ben Nevis, Southern Highlands, all of that. It's all in there, all of the best routes. And then on the right, Scotland's Winter Mountains by Martin Moran. So that is that Ben Van picture that I talked about earlier. This book's not in print, but if you can find it on eBay, it's an absolute gem. And Martin writes about epics he's had and what he's learned and how to look at the weather and work out what's going on in different parts of Scotland. So it's a really good reference book to sort of have a look and go, okay, well, what weather systems would mean that these things in this area might be in good condition? And I've definitely used that as a way of trying to figure out where I want to go and what routes might be in condition. So that's one that's worth seeking out if you can find it. So my sort of tips and lessons in terms of heading up to the Northwest would be to go and explore and see what happens. Often conditions are good up there when you might not expect them to be. Build up slowly to trickier things. So rather than sort of thinking, oh, well, I've done this route of this grade on Ben Nevis and then going up there, drop your grade a little bit and go and explore and see what it's like and see how it's different, because it feels a lot more wild. Make sure that you're able to cope with the different conditions. Some of these mountains, so like WAAC, if you do some of the routes on there, it's quite serious terrain to get off. Your navigation needs to be spot on to navigate through little steep crags. It's not like you're always walking off the easier rounded side of the mountain up there. It's not like being in the Cairngorms where you can top out in Corinch-Nectar and take a couple of bearings to be coming back down Firkle Ridge. You need to make sure that you can navigate, or make sure that you're going there when the conditions and the weather's going to be good for being able to see where you're going. And then sort of said a little bit about the rock types. Quartzite's often relatively easy to protect and quite positive climbing. The sandstone can feel a little bit more exciting and harder to protect. So again, just like building it up, just like if you always climb in North Wales and you head over to the gritstone, you're not going to get on a route at your limit on the gritstone because it feels really different and you need to move differently and the gear's different, and so you drop your grade a little bit and do a couple of routes to suss out how it feels and how you're going. So just the same up there really, and bearing in mind that it's much more remote than sort of the Ben and the Cairngorms. And I'd say it's a cool place to visit whatever the conditions, because there's lots to do. If you've got a summer scrambling guide as well and there's not as much snow as you thought, you can combine that and just come up with some really cool adventures to really give yourself some fun mountaineering. So whatever the weather, it can be a really cool place to go and hang out. So I have not really got anything else to say about my sunny photos of the Northwest, but some people might have some questions.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Kath. That was amazing. I think, yeah, I agree with the whole 15 years of sunny photos in half an hour. I think that sums up Scottish winter. But that was amazing. And it's an area that's completely new to me. I've never made it that far north, but it's made me want to even more. So thank you so much for getting all those photos together and putting all the time that it takes to put it together. We really appreciate that. So yeah, if you've got any questions at all, please do feel free to ask them. You can either write them in the chat function at the bottom there and I'll ask Kath, or if you'd like to ask yourself, you can raise your hand by going down to the participants button at the bottom, and then there's a thingy that says raise hand, and then we'll see that. If you're watching on Facebook, if you'd like to put a little comment on the post that Lizzie's shared in the group, then we can ask that as well. This presentation has been recorded, and like all the other ones, it will be on our website. So if you want to go back through and take notes and look things up with a guidebook as well, like that would be a really cool way to spend a horrible wintry evening, I think, planning for next year. So yeah, if anyone's got any questions, do write them in. One of the things I was going to ask, Kath, you talked about banging in or hammering in pegs or the bulldog. Do you carry a hammer? How do you hammer them in? What do you mean by, what do you use?
So when you've got a set of ice axes, you've got one axe will have what's called an adze on the back. In fact, hang on 1 second.
Like Blue Peter, here's one I made earlier. I like how you've got them at hand. That's great. Always optimistic about Welsh winter. Yeah, so if you do have any questions, add them in, and Kath will be back shortly, hopefully with some ice axes.
It's easier to show you.
Thank you.
I've had these ready. Right, so this is an axe with an adze, and that adze is for chopping in the snow. So if you wanted to chop out a ledge to stand on, you could use that and you'd just be doing that. Or it might be that in the cracks that you're wanting to, so you're searching for gear, everything's covered in snow, and you just use your adze to scrape away in corners where you think there might be cracks to look for gear. Yeah. Equally, it can be useful for chipping away at ice to maybe make it easier to get an ice screw in, getting a flat surface. Yeah, so that's the adze, which hasn't answered Jenny's question. This is the hammer. Yeah, I don't know if it's.
Yeah, we can see that. Yeah,
see that. So you can use that hammer for hammering in the pegs or the bulldog or the warthog. Now, this is a sort of modern tool with a funny ergonomic handle, so not like your classic axe. This is the first one I could get my hands on, but some of these come without a hammer or an adze, and and they work really well ice climbing, but it doesn't mean you can't use them. I've got a pair of nomics that haven't got a hammer on adze, and I just use the back bit and hammer in with that, and that seems to work fine. But I guess if you had a standard mountaineering style of winter climbing axe, it would have a bit of a curve on with a handle down here, with a hammer and an adze on them.
Great, thank you. Yeah, so you don't have to like buy a hammer from B&Q and take it up with you. That might look a bit odd, possibly. Yeah.
I have bought a saw from B&Q to go snowholing before though.
That's a whole different story. Yeah. That's great. Perry, I can see you've turned your video on. Do you want to ask Kath a question? No. That's fine. I was just wondering if you wanted to. I saw your comment saying that you've been taking notes, so that's fab. Cheers. The other thing, Kath, I wanted to ask you about was you mentioned about the step from kind of summer mountaineering skills into winter, and I suppose that's quite similar to taking your UK summer scrambling skills or something like that into the Alps. So would you say that Scottish winter was a good training ground for kind of, if you're interested in alpine stuff, I suppose, and also how do you make that step? Is there much difference in the rope work? How would you do that?
I would say that the Scottish winter is a pretty good stepping stone. It's almost like the traditional apprenticeship of the mountaineer is to climb on the mountains in Wales and the Lake District, and the Scottish mountains in the summer, and then the Scottish winter, and then go to the Alps. And I think because the Alps are more accessible now with EasyJet, it's easy to go, I'm a summer rock climber, I'm going to try the Alps. But I think the Scottish winter has a lot to offer in terms of helping to develop skills to deal with not such nice conditions. So you're probably going to be a little bit more resilient if you've had some days out in Scotland than if you haven't. And if you got caught out in bad weather in the Alps, then you've got a little bit more of knowledge of, what are the things you can do, because you're kind of used to dealing with those sort of conditions in Scotland. And in terms of developing your snow and ice climbing, it's a nice environment to develop that, rather than being straight into sort of water ice climbing in Norway or somewhere like that. Snow and ice climbing, you can sort of build up a little bit more progressively by doing some gullies, grade 1 gullies, getting into that sort of terrain, and then going on from there, rather than suddenly stepping into steeper, harder ice. So I think it's a good sort of progression for folks to go to Scotland. What it does do is it gets you fit as well, because you have to walk. But actually, unless you're in areas in the Alps that are served by lifts, you've got to like walking to go alpine climbing, really, because you've got to walk into the hut to get to the route. So Scotland helps prepare you for that. And there's just spectacular routes up there, and it's a massive area of really big mountains. Yeah, we got 14 mountains in North Wales over 1,000 meters, and in Scotland they got 282. You know, so you're getting that sort of bigger scale. And then I don't know how many Corbetts there are, but loads of big mountains that are sort of like the same sort of size as most of the Welsh mountains as well, all dotted in between. So from that sort of getting a wilderness experience, more of a wilderness experience, through to developing your skills, it's a really good place to go. In terms of rope work, if you're pitching climbing, you're pitching climbing. And if you're perhaps doing something like the pinnacles on WAAC, you might have the rope stored in your bag and get it out to do a few pitches to safeguard yourself through the crux of the traverse, and then put it away again when you're back onto walking terrain. So it's good for helping you to develop that sort of judgment on where you need the rope and where you don't need the rope. And obviously in Scotland, you don't need to walk around when you're on the flat with the rope on, because we haven't got any crevasses. So in the Alps, you'd be walking across glaciers to get to routes, and you've got a rope on to safeguard anyone from falling into a crevasse. Whereas in Scotland, we're free of that worry. Our biggest worry is being able to navigate off if the weather isn't very nice, and avoid the edges and gullies and so on. So I think it's a really good place to develop your skills further, to give yourself confidence to go to bigger mountains.
Yeah, thank you. There's some gems in there. That's fantastic. Thank you. In terms of, you mentioned navigation, so having your navigation like on point is super. You know, navigating in winter, there just aren't as many landmarks and things obvious as there are in summer, so definitely doing that. How about considerations like avalanches and snowpack conditions? You know, we're pretty aware of those when we're winter mountaineering in the Alps or ski touring, those kind of things. Where could we find that information for Scotland? Is it something we need to be worried about there?
Yeah, it's something that you need to be worried about, and I think the best place to look is the Scottish Avalanche Information Service, sais.gov.uk. So I don't know if someone wants to write that down for folks to see, but they've got a really good website. It's really comprehensive, and they've got a good section on how to plan your day out. So it kind of comes in a three-pronged manner. They talk about this 3x3 system. So it's about looking at the weather, the conditions, and the conditions, the terrain, and then the people that you're with, and using that information to plan an appropriate day. So if you've got someone who you know isn't super fit, you're not going to plan a massive big day out. You're going to choose something that's appropriate. And then they also, you're using that weather and conditions to work out which terrain is safe to access. Yeah, so any slope over 30 degrees can avalanche if it's got snow and the conditions are right. So you can get information about that from the Avalanche Service website. So they do forecasts for Torridon, but they only do that at the weekend. So in Torridon, you've got to, or the Northwest, you've got to be a little bit more self-sufficient, which means looking at the weather forecast. So for example, if the weather's been coming from the east for the last week, the west slopes are going to have more buildup of snow on them. So you've kind of got that in mind in your planning phase. And it's what I tend to do is just jot down the weather, the forecast. And you've got to remember it's just a forecast. And if you haven't been there, you don't know what it's actually been doing. But I tend to jot that down and then use that to help me with that process, and then use any information I can get from the Torridon Avalanche Service blog and their recent forecasts, sort of mix that all in together and then make a decision. And then obviously once you're out on the hill, as you're going along, are things matching with what you expect? And if it's not, then it might be that you need to change your plan. So there's less, I guess that's one of the things that makes it feel more wild and remote, is there's less information out there available. Whereas when you go to the Ben, the avalanche forecasters are out every day on Annickmore or Ben Nevis, and they're providing really like the best information possible they've got, and it's, you know, it's 7 days a week. So yeah, have a look on that sais.gov.uk. And then if you want to find out more about avalanches in general, the Swiss have got a really good website called White Risk, where you can do lots of different avalanche courses to learn about stuff. So they're like free online fun quizzes and things with a load of stuff and things to do to answer the quiz questions. And then there's another one, American one, called Know Before You Go, which is pretty good. And that, again, it's a bit more aimed at ski tourers and snowmobilers, actually. But there's information that applies to mountaineers, whether you're on foot, on skis, or on a snowmobile. So yeah, trying to find out as much as you can, or do a course and find out about avalanches. But I think a good starting point for anyone is that Scottish Avalanche Information Service. And they've been running through COVID. So you can go and have a look now, and there'll be live information for what's going on in Scotland at the moment.
Great, thank you. Really interesting and really important information. We've got a question here from Hannah. Thanks, Hannah. It says, someone who's done a lot of winter walking and who's a sport climber, how can you get started with building confidence on the more technical knowledge for winter climbing? For example, should she get some one-to-one tuition, hire a guide. And how do you get started if you don't know any winter climbers personally? I think a lot of us get dragged along by someone who's already done it or anything. But how do you get started? How do you gain that knowledge, I suppose?
I think you're right there, Jenny. Loads of people, they get into it by getting dragged along by a friend. So the clubs, obviously, you guys have got a club set up, haven't you?
Yeah.
So that might be a really good way to get into it if there's some Scottish winter club action going on, or even Welsh winter if conditions allow. Joining a course is another way, and I think the benefits of joining a course are that there's other people in the same boat as you trying to get knowledge as well. So you'll meet other people to be able to perhaps go out with after the course. But equally, you could pay for one-to-one tuition. I think it depends what you're after. If you're after sort of general technical knowledge to go out winter walking and then build up confidence from there, I think probably finding a way of being able to meet other people who you can go out with afterwards and consolidate with is really important. It's part of that journey. But if you just want to have a taste of what is winter climbing, take me winter climbing so I can see if I like it, then probably the easiest way to do that is to pay someone to take you up a winter route and then see if you like it. So it just depends what your aspirations are further down the line, really, and whether you're keen to meet other people to do it on your own, or whether you just want to have an experience to decide whether you want to do more of it. And the other way, depending on your age, is that there's various subsidised courses available. So there's one that's Plas Brenin run every winter, which is called the Brownhill Memorial Fund. I think that's for under 25s, and you get on a winter mountaineering course for 5 days. So that's worth looking up if you're in that age bracket. And then there's also Conville courses, which run in Scotland, which are subsidised courses to give you winter skills. And I can't remember, maybe that's under 30. I'm not 100% sure on that, but that's worth looking up as well. So there are things out there. Equally, I know Glenmore Lodge run loads of courses for students that you can get onto to get basic winter training. So there's all sorts of different avenues, just maybe they're not quite well enough publicised for people to find out unless they know someone who knows, which we need to change.
Yeah, there are different, so both Glenmore Lodge and Plas Brenin have been running women's winter weeks or weekends over the last few years, haven't they, which are really well attended, and you get to rub shoulders with the likes of Kath James and Sam Leary and Libby Peter, and it's all very exciting. And and also, but if you want to look for your own guide or your own instructor, you need to be looking for people who are qualified to take you out in the winter. So that would be a winter mountaineering climbing instructor with the Association of Mountaineering Instructors, you can find one, or a British mountain guide as well, to just make sure that you're finding people from the right background. So yeah, some great tips in there. I just saw something. Oh, and so she's stuck in flat 5 at the moment, hopefully not for too much longer. But yeah, it's definitely something we could look at with WAAC, maybe adding into the women's winter action. Would be great at some point. Had some lovely comments on Facebook, Kath, saying how wonderful it was and how much information you put in. But I don't think if anyone's got any more questions, I think we'll wrap up there. There's some information how you contact Kath if you have any questions following on, and this will be on the website after, and what I'll try and do is draw together all of those links and everything into the article that goes with it as well, so it's a handy resource. So thank you so much, Kath, and yeah, really appreciate your time again, and thanks for supporting the club so much. That was great. Thank you.
No worries. Thanks very much. Come and say hi if you see me out on the crag or in the winter or wherever. Yeah. Cool.
Thank you so much, Kath. Like, again, just great to have you back. And as I said the other day when we got to do the run through, just so enthused to go up to Scotland as soon as we can, whatever the weather. But thank you everybody for joining. As we've said a couple of times, all of our Alpine stories, the summer series and this winter series, they've all been recorded. They've also been put onto our website with loving care and lots of extra information and resources by Jenny and Louise. So so much information, so many great talks. If you've not seen them all, definitely worth going to. So the website, I think it might be on this next page. Yeah, www.womensalpineadventureclub.com. And then if you do /Alpine-stories, it will take you directly to that link where you're going to see the recordings. And also, I think that's where the articles are as well. Favorite Alpine routes. So make sure, if you're not already, following us on Facebook and Instagram. Sort of the club, you want to join it, we've got for women a private Facebook group, and also make sure that you're part of our newsletter, because that's where you're going to get the most up-to-date information as things open up again. We're looking to do face-to-face events as soon as possible, so please make sure that you're following us there. And as we said, if you want to get in touch with Kath directly, here's her Facebook and Instagram information, so do get in touch with her. Obviously she's an amazing woman and very, very generous with her time and information, so I'm sure she'd be happy to answer any questions that you have. And just to say from all of us, thank you so much for joining. It's been an amazing second series of Alpine Stories. We wish you all loads of love, hope to see you soon. Keep safe until then, keep sane, keep planning adventures. We'll be out soon, and we will very much look forward to seeing you then. Have a great night, guys.